Hey, I'm Zach McDonald, your real estate agent with Real Property Associates, and this is my Seattle Real Estate Market Watch for February 15th, 2023. Today, we're going to look at the stats from King and Snohomish County, the Seattle metro area here over the past week. And if you missed it, we just released the most recent Seattle real estate market update as well last week. So go ahead and take a look at that if you haven't. But this week, we're going to dive into the stats over the past week like we always do in these videos. And we'll start with new listings. We're continuing with the trend of listings being down. It's not going to be as apparent until we get to the end of the month. But again, we're seeing a uptick in listings, which is great, 355 this last week versus 324 last week, but we're still not seeing a ton. And typically we start to see the inventory picking up in February. Back on the market, we had 73 listings. We had 67 the previous week, so a little bit more coming back onto the market after maybe taking their houses off the market for a little bit or canceling them and relisting them, which again, we had 39 canceled listings last week versus 58 the week before. List price reductions, 172, and we're continuing to see a trend of declining list price reductions. We had 182 the prior week. And again, in the spring and summer, we are seeing large numbers of list price reductions, but we're just not seeing as many right now. And of course, we're still seeing them because the market is not super hot yet, but it is starting to pick up. And that is one of the things that we're looking at. Are there a lot of price reductions? List price increases, 45 more than the week before. It always is interesting to me, again, why we even have list price increases or where that comes about. I've explained that in some of the other videos. Contingent purchases, something I've been watching and I want to share. 5 contingent purchases versus 14 last week. And that's a trend down. We've been seeing the number of contingent purchases trending down recently, and 5, well, that's not a lot when you think of 2 whole counties over 1 week. And when we look at the number of pending listings, 743 pending listings. Well, again, that's a pretty small percentage. So over the past 6-8 months, we've seen a lot of contingent purchases. And when I say a lot, I just mean a lot more than normal. But we're starting to trend back towards pretty much none. So if you're somebody that does need to buy and sell, this is where the option of selling before you buy, kind of as part of the process, is much more difficult. And you have to start looking at some of the other options like selling your house and moving out and then buying, or buying and keeping the other mortgage for a short amount of time. So those are 2 of the strategies. I'll link up a video in the comments where I talk about some of those strategies more in greater depth. Sold listings, 406. Last week we had 344. Again, we're just starting to see some of the middle of end of January deals starting to close in February. And I suspect we're going to continue to see the number of solds take up as we head towards the end of the month. Again, those are all sales that would have happened the previous month. So the pendings is what I'm looking at. 743 pendings, wow, versus 354. Now, one thing I'll point out, last week the pending sales were at 827. So we do have fewer pending sales this week, quite a bit than we did the previous week. And one reason, I'll just jump to this now, mortgage rates. One reason I think maybe things have slowed just a tiny bit are the mortgage rates. So mortgage rates had stabilized kind of in the 6.25 range for multiple months, even dipped down close to 6 and just below, but now we're up to 6.75. Last week we were at 6.45, which had been a jump from the previous week, and now we're at 6.75. So I think we're seeing mortgage rates increase, and that might be one of the reasons we're starting to see a little bit of maybe hesitation with buyers again. But they've been relatively stable for a few months, so the buyer activity has been picking up, and that's a big reason why we're seeing so many pendings. But then the lack of listings is causing us to be in this low inventory environment. So something I've been talking about over the past few months and even in the most recent market update is that we are finding ourselves in a little bit more competitive housing market. So buyers in the Seattle area are finding themselves competing with other buyers. There have been a lot more people coming to open houses and a lot more showings on listings. I even had one of my listings in Blue Ridge, a great neighborhood in Seattle, that went pending. That massive fixer-upper, by the way. But we ended up getting a great offer on it over the weekend, and the house was having very few showings before we went under contract. Unfortunately, the previous buyer didn't work out, and in the end, they backed out a few days before the closing date. But when we put it back on the market, we started to see more showings, we started to get some offers. But what really happened over these past few weeks is the number of showings picked up dramatically, and nothing really changed. We didn't change the price, we didn't change anything. The amount of interest is what had changed. So I think we're seeing a lot more interest from buyers, which is good news for sellers. But again, a little caution, the interest rates have started to tick up again. So if you're thinking about buying or selling and you have questions, or heck, if you just have questions about what's going on in the housing market, you can always feel free to reach out to me. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel and you want to follow along and hear more of this content, please do so.